What then ultimately do you think is going to happen to the large caps and small caps by the end of the year? Give us your prediction for the S&P 500 and even the Russell.
Yeah, so I think that we're probably going to continue to trend higher until like probably October of this year. So typically, we get a market decline or recession 11 months after we first raise interest rates. And that's also approaching the election. So I think we're just going to keep trending higher or chop around slightly until the October timeframe. And I do think there's probably going to be some sort of a decline before the elections, somewhere around October, which will be a viable decline in my opinion.
We're talking the most recent activity in the markets with our next guest, Anmol Singh, trader and investor. He's been on the show several times. We'll be talking about the broad markets, cryptos, and the stocks that he's looking at and trading right now. Anmol, good to see you always.
Always good to have you, always good to chatting with you. So happy to be here
My
again.
friends are always asking me, when are you getting ammo back to go over the markets and go over charts? They actually follow your trading patterns because you've been quite accurate in the past on a number of occasions. So let's talk about broad markets first. This morning, we're speaking on Monday, the 29th of April. It seems to me that we're getting a bit of a bounce from last week's sell-off, but last week had people spooked. People were wondering if this is the end of the bull rally. Certainly, we've seen a big pullback since the top of March. What is going on right now? Is the market just kind of taking a breather, or do you think that the bull rally has ended?
I wouldn't say that the bull rally has ended, but at the same point, when we get that extended, when we've been having a beautiful run up in the whole of this year as well as last year, there's some profit taking, right? We had some tax season come in for April. There was some uncertainty. We're talking about raising the taxes or unrealized gains. So it definitely spooked a lot of people. I think there was just a tax profit taken for that purposes. But overall, I don't think we're broken yet. I think we're still in a beautiful uptrend. That still thinks that it has legs to go. But as they say, right, sell-in may go away. It didn't play out last few years, but as we approach that area now, there's a possibility that where we could see some profit taking. We are definitely extended on higher time frames. Like if you take a look at a monthly chart, we're just like running up, and we haven't seen any pullbacks. I think we had like 6 or 7 up months in a row. So to get a down month is not out of the ordinary. And I find it funny where people freak out with like one little, few down weeks. I'm like, hey, we've been running up for like a whole year. So getting some digestion is actually healthy for the markets so that the uptrend can resume. But it is, we're not in a normal environment. We're in the middle of an election year. We got a couple wars going on. We got a lot of uncertainty ahead. So I think there's going to be a lot of back and forth for the whole rest of the year.
I think what people were spooked about is not just, yeah, the profit taking, but also the magnitude of the drop. I think it was 5% over the course of like 1 or 2 weeks, which is significant for
Mm.
the S&P 500. Now, as you know, it's been bouncing back slightly. I wonder what the momentum is favoring right now. Is it more upside from this bounce up from the bottom, or more consolidation, you think?
I think, like right now we're coming bouncing back up to the 50-period moving average. So as long as we stay below that area, there's still a chance that this is just a lower high, like a little bounce, and then we continue our way lower. So, I think this is one of the environments where we're probably just going to chop around for at least the next couple months until we get to that probably July or August timeframe. We're going to get a lot of back and forth. So I think I think it'll be as a traders not to expect a whole lot in this environment. Don't expect some big moves to the upside. Don't expect some big moves to the downside. I think we're going to enter a period of just choppiness and consolidation.
You don't think that the Federal Reserve is going to surprise the markets to the downside? I've heard the narrative that we're not getting as many cuts as the markets have guessed that we were getting. We may not even get any cuts at all if inflation keeps staying very hot. And if that's the case, we might get a correction, right? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I try not to predict what the Federal Reserve is going to do because I mean, if you take a look for the last several years, right? I mean, they've just been doing the same old, and the markets haven't really reacted to that. They just continue to grind its way higher. So I think for me, I'm only focused on the technical perspective and not focusing too much on what the Federal Reserve is going to do because that's not in my control. As a trader investor, I want to be able to control what I can control, and the things that I have no control over, I just let those patterns play out. And I think the biggest thing is right now to just focus on the technicals, learn to lock in profits along the way. Like if you're one just going to be holding on, now if you're a long-term investor, then that's a different story. But if you're somebody like me who's either trading in and out of the markets, I think it serves us well to take some profits and not try to be in the prediction business of what the Federal Reserve is going to do, and rather trying to be in the investment in the trading business.
Okay. What about small caps? Russell 2000 lagging the S&P 500 all throughout last year. Can we finally see it catch up this year?
I think we're going to need for that. I think we need the rates to come down, right? For any time we're looking for, assets that are people are risk averse, we need the low interest rate environment for that to for small caps to start to go up. And similar for actually altcoins. If you use, Bitcoin's been strong, Ethereum's been really strong, but a lot of the altcoins this year have lagged behind, and I think that's product of interest rates. And I think that for smaller caps, altcoins, which I put them in the same basket
Yeah.
as smaller caps for them, we definitely need some interest rates to start coming down again.
And maybe we've talked about this last time, but if you look at the Russell, it's been trading range bound since 2022. It hasn't even
Mm,
retraced its 2022 or 2021 highs, rather. So what's been
yeah.
going on there? Because one could say that, well, the overall stock market, if you just take a look at mid caps, has just been really bad in the US. It's only a few names in the tech sector, the large ones, pulling up the rest of the index. If you're investing in anything else, you haven't made much money. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I think it's all about AI these days, right? Like, I mean, Microsoft, Google, all these companies, the reason they've outperformed, including Nvidia, is the whole AI thing. So I think now we have such good opportunities in these bigger cap stocks that the risk reward is the main thing, right? Right now, people are seeing more reward potential still in the big caps like Google, like Microsoft, like, even Meta, for example, even though it went down on earnings. I think that's where the opportunity lies, and people are seeing much like better use of their capital in those areas than putting it in small cap stocks, which aren't really participating. They're not really part of the whole AI trend. Interest rates are still high. So there's also certain like a flight to a sure thing, slight flight to safety, for example, is in those bigger cap stocks. I think smaller cap stocks is a lot of risk. And we're seeing that in the markets that people are risk averse. They're not bidding up those smaller cap stocks or the IWM.
We're going to continue with Anmol's take on Tesla and where he thinks the stock is going to go in just a bit. But first, a word from our sponsor, iTrust Capital, an IRA that offers 35 crypto assets and the lowest trading fees in the crypto IRA space at 1%. If you're over 18 and you'd like to open a new account with cash or roll over an existing account and learn about iTrust Capital's unique tax benefits, click on the link down below, iTrust Capital /David, or scan the QR code here to learn more and get started. And if you use my referral link, you'll get a $100 signing bonus if you sign up. What then ultimately do you think is going to happen to the large caps and small caps by the end of the year? Give us your prediction for the S&P 500 and even the Russell.
Yeah, so I think that we're probably going to continue to trend higher until like probably October of this year. So typically, we get a market decline or recession 11 months after we first raise interest rates. So I think we raised interest rates last year in August, so 11 months is going to be September. Typically, that's when you start to get a downturn. 11 months after raising interest rates, and September and October historically has also been a tough time for the markets where we've seen those corrections, including last year, including the year before, and that's also approaching the election. So I think we're just going to keep trending higher or chop around slightly until the October timeframe. And I do think there's probably going to be some sort of a decline before the elections, somewhere around October, which will be a viable decline in my opinion. But yeah, for me, I'm being in the boat of locking in profits along the way, going into more of a trader's mindset. Some of the positions have come back big time, right? I mean, take a look at the comeback in a lot of these stocks like Meta, like Google, like Microsoft, Nvidia, Tesla, even recently. So for me, I'm like, okay, let's lock in profits. Let's use a trader's mindset. And then hopefully when I get a decline in October, I'll be able to buy those things back again.
Why a decline in October? What does the elections have to do with the markets per your observation?
So, like, if you take a look at the pattern, right, 11 months typically after we first raise interest rates
Mhm.
is typically when you tend to see the reaction in the markets. So, last time we raised interest rates was last August. So, 11 months is going to be about that September timeframe. And technically, if you take a look at the last few years, September, October has been the time frame where you start to get those declines. So, I think around that area, I'm going to be forecasting another potential decline in that time frame.
Okay, and let's move on to Bitcoin now. Bitcoin has seen the worst month this month since 2022. Uh, People don't think about how far it's declined since this huge rally we've had all throughout 2023. What's happening now with Bitcoin? Same story as tech stocks, or is it moving on its own?
I think Bitcoin just on its own, like, like that's why last few times we spoke about Bitcoin on your show, I talked about like people are so quick to jump into first, it's a flight to safety. Then they're like, okay, it's not, right? Then it's moving with the tech stocks. Okay, maybe it's not. Like it's too early, even in the Bitcoin realm, to pick correlations. It's on its own. That's pretty much as simple as that. We saw some run up before because of the Bitcoin halving, the ETFs coming out. And now it's kind of dried out. The ETFs are not really seeing a lot of inflows as far as the last couple months are concerned. So I think that Bitcoin is one that's going to be on its own. It's not really correlated to any asset at this point. It's its own asset. And I think right now it's just in a consolidation phase, which makes sense because we had a pretty big run up, right? From the 16,000 back up to like almost 70. So I think we're just going to chop around, until then. But I still think overall, probably is 80, 84,000 is where it's headed, in my opinion. And hopefully the altcoins can participate because that's where my investments are. I'm not really invested in Bitcoin, even though I think it's probably going to go to 84,000. Altcoins is what I'm looking at right now. I think that's where the real opportunity lies.
I'm just curious what your reasoning is. Why aren't you in the Bitcoin market? Why are you in altcoins?
Yeah, so I am looking at it as a technology. So I'm not, speculating on okay the price going up or anything like that. I'm not a believer in Bitcoin. Just personal opinion. I don't really believe in it. I think there's better, faster technology. And in my opinion, Bitcoin is kind of like the AOL of the internet stages, where it was the first one. It was a great idea, a revolutionary idea. It started it all. But now there's better, faster technology that's actually being used, right, in real world assets. I think that's the only thing I'm focused on is real world uses of that currency. And Bitcoin's too volatile, right? Nobody's really using it as a currency. And even Bitcoiners are like, don't sell it, right? Keep holding on. I'm like, well, the whole reason Bitcoin was started was to be meant to be used as a currency. And now we're not. And now we're begging for the same people where we talked about decentralization. Now we're begging the same people, come on, ETFs, buy more ETFs to be approved. And now we're hoping institutions come in and buy it up for us. So I just don't see that investment from a long-term standpoint for me personally. Nothing wrong with people investing it, just not for me. And I think altcoins, I'm focused on what's being used in real world, right? There's tokenization happening right now of real estate, right? On cryptos like Algorand. There's companies like Lofty AI. So they're now the tokenized real estate, Airbnb's properties, rental properties on blockchain where you're getting paid rent almost every day, daily rent being paid on the blockchain. I think that's what I'm focused on. And there's another company, TravelX, that does airline tickets as NFTs on, let's say, the Algorand blockchain, where you get into an airline ticket, you can sell it to somebody else, and the name can be transferred. So a lot of that's what I'm focused on as a technology, not so much as a currency.
Okay, that's interesting. So you don't believe then that Bitcoin could be used as a more wide, well, for more widely adopted as a medium of exchange in the future. That's what some people say it's headed if it hasn't gone there already. Its use case is money, not as a technology play.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah,
think
and
that's going to
and but
happen?
we're not seeing that, right?
Okay.
We haven't seen that yet. But it may be. But I think a lot of the layer one technologies, the cryptos, they're going to be used to perhaps get Bitcoin to be used. Because right now, Bitcoin on its own, without the whole Lightning Network and all of that, it's very expensive, right? And it's still pretty slow. I think if I send you a Bitcoin, it might take you 15 minutes for it to whole completely settle. And now there's cryptos with
Right.
just 3 seconds, you know.
Right. That's why there's layer twos, but that's a technology on its own. You're right. The layer one is very slow. Let's talk about some stocks now. Tesla, you're very active trading Tesla. You've analyzed it before. Before we talk about the stock pattern itself, let's talk about the company. Model 2 is all the rave. People are saying that this is going to revolutionize the entire industry. It's going to really bring Tesla to the forefront of the auto industry. It's going to bring Tesla to the masses. Are you hyped about the Model 2?
Yes and no. Like, so for me, Tesla as a car company, like, okay, I'm not even concerned about that. Like, I'm only focusing on FSD, right? That on its own, like, even if they sell the cars at cost, right? FSD on its own is a business that it's worth looking at. And I think Elon just announced a couple of days ago over the weekend, they're investing $10 billion into their AI, right? Robo taxis are going to be announced on August 8th. So I think that is the play right there because they put out screenshots of what their app's going to look like, the ride hailing app. So think about competing with Uber, right? Biggest cost Uber has is its drivers. That's 75% of their cost. Right now, imagine there's no drivers. How much Uber, like just like Tesla cut costs in the cars and drove other EV players out, imagine what they can do with the cost of the fares for rides when there's no drivers. It's basically just cars driving itself. So I think that's going to cut into a lot of Uber's profits, Lyft's profits. That's a business on its own. Full self-driving, they're saying that they're currently in talks with major auto manufacturers to license that FSD technology. Right now, you can get it for 99 bucks a month. I think that's where the play is at. And today, we saw the reaction in the stock price as they made headway in China to get FSD approved. That's a huge market on its own. So I think that's the play people need to focus on is not look at it as a car company and compare it with General Motors or Ford, but really look at it as an AI play, which is the biggest AI project in history. I think even Kathy Wood said that, which I'm, agreeing with her now. We used to talk about our ETF as being a short play for many, many years, but I think now that 10% of our fund is Tesla, I think that ARK ETF also is going to make a comeback.
Yeah, let's talk about recent price move first, and then we can talk more about the future. So what happened last week? We jumped from $137 to now
Mm.
195 in the course of a couple of days. What was the announcement again?
So there was a few announcements. So they made headway in China to get approval for FSD to launch in China. That's number bigger. That's probably the biggest thing. And then Elon also said they're going to invest $10 billion into their AI project. That's the biggest project there. And robotaxis, they announced 8th of August, they're going to unveil that. But then they also released screenshots of their app showing what the app's going to look like and how you can hail rides. I think that is what the market really reacted to. And the Model 2, sure, that is definitely a thing. Because think about it, $25,000 car, if they can sell a lot of them, but then also sell them an FSD on top for 99 bucks a month, huge market, I think, for that. So I think the markets reacted to that positively, and also seeing Elon fully back at it, right? From they were concerned about him focusing on X and Twitter, and now he's back at it. He's posting about Tesla, he's tweeting about Tesla, he's being really active, and I think market really loves that. But from a technical standpoint, it came right down to the trend line at like 138 area and bounced perfectly right there. So from a technical perspective, I'm like, hey, that's exactly what we talked about. And I posted on Twitter that it's coming down to a trend line. That is an area where potentially is a viable spot.
Yeah, I think that the promise is Model 2 by 2025, if I'm not mistaken. But let's talk cars for a minute, just because you and I both like cars. Do you think that this is the right corporate strategy for Tesla? Meaning, would a cheap Tesla hurt the image of a premium brand that was Tesla? In other words, would it hurt the sale of the Model S's or the Model X's, for example?
I think yes, there's a possibility for that, but then again, there's like Cybertruck that are still considered very premium, and you see celebrities like Kim Kardashian, Justin Bieber, all these posting pictures with their Cybertruck. They're getting free marketing, so they've actually done a really good job because they have the higher end there with the Model S's, the X's, and the Cybertruck that brings that sort of like a halo effect into the brand, where other people who are not able to afford that, but now they can actually still be involved in the Tesla ecosystem. So think about Tesla as like where Apple was many, many years ago. It's the App Store, right? So FSD is where it's at. So for them, it's a perfect play. Get the top of the market, get the bottom of the market. Everybody's on FSD, and that's where the real money is going to be for the company. I think just the FSD revenue alone is going to surpass what they do just in cars.
How's that going to be monetized? They're going to sell the information to other companies?
Yeah, so A, there's three ways they can monetize it, right? One, obviously, just selling FSD to pretty much most of their customers. B, robotaxis are going to be launched. That's going to be running on that FSD, right? And that's just they're launching a separate business there, ride hailing and ride sharing kind of a business. That's a business on its own. And then Elon just recently said they're currently in talks with major auto manufacturers to license their FSD. Because the other closest competitor, I think, is like Mercedes, which is the exact same price as the FSD. But then the Mercedes, you can't change lanes, you can't do it at night, you can't do it on the highways, you can't do it on, there's a lot of limitations there. So I think when other auto manufacturers probably will feel that, you know what, we're wasting money spending on research and development trying to build our own thing.
Mhm.
It's a working product right here. Let's just license that technology. So I think those are the three revenue ways that FSD can be really monetized.
Yeah, I think Mercedes is the only company to have full level three authorized.
Yeah.
So the new S class can just drive itself. But yeah, you're right. There's certain limitations. I don't think it can work at night. I don't think it can
Yeah, it
work in
can't
the
work
rain.
at night, can't work on a highway, can't change lanes. There's a speed limit on it. Like there's a lot of limitations. And I think Tesla just leaps and bounds ahead. And if they're gonna announce on 8th of October the robotaxis, that means how confident they are on it's almost there to be able to fully autonomous.
Overall, though, the stock has not done well over the last year, right? It's dropped about 33% from its highs. I think, yeah, $300 now. It's at 195. It's just it was the laggard of the Magnificent Seven. What happened the last year?
I think there was a lot of negative news cycle and a lot of misinformation too, right? We saw Reuters publish an article saying, Tesla scrapped their $25,000 car. And then Elon came and said, okay, this is a lie. We're actually still working on it. So it was just negative news cycle after negative news cycle. So-called fund managers, I'm not going to take any names, but, they were all tweeting negatively about Tesla. They were concerned about him tweeting too much or sharing his opinions too much and not really being involved as a CEO. So I think there was a lot of concerns that Elon's more focused on X. He's more focused on being politically active. And I think a lot of the customer base that Tesla had previously were, on that side of the climate change and to the left-leaning audience. And I think a lot of them felt alienated. And we saw that with certain fund managers saying, hey, we're going to get out of our position. And then negative news cycle after negative news cycle. I think that's what really caused it. But at the same time, from a technical perspective, I'm like, Tesla had a huge run up. The stock is still up massively, right, over the last like 10 years. So a correction is likely because the reversion to the mean from trading perspective is very real. Nothing just goes up in a straight line. Anything that goes up big time will also correct. So I think that's what we saw here. We're seeing the stock digest the last few years. And I think next year is going to be a pretty big year for Tesla.
Short-term play then. So are we buying Tesla right now? Should we hold? Should we sell? Ride the momentum downwards? What's your play?
So I'm not sure if you want to have the chart that I had sent you on
Yeah.
Tesla, but yeah, so on that chart is how I think it's going to play out. And that's why I tell people that this year, 2024, don't expect a whole lot from Tesla stock, right? Don't expect it to make huge moves to the upside. Don't expect it to make huge moves to the downside. I think the stock is just going to chop around in that pattern. And probably next year, January, February, March, is where I think we're going to get that breakout. And the stock, in my opinion, is going to be above 350 at that point. But if you take a look at the chart, that's the weekly time frame chart. We can see the clear consolidation and the coiling pattern happen right now. It came right back down to the trend line, 137. It bounced exactly up from there. And I think we're just going to be in that phase for the rest of the year. And I think next year, we're probably going to get that breakout above 300, 350.
Is there a Tesla product that really excites you personally that's coming out?
I would love for FSD to be available in New York because I'll be honest, like I love cars, but I don't like to drive cars, not in New York City. I'd rather, sit on my car, be on my phone, and just let it drive me to where it wants to drive me, park itself. I would love that. So I think I'm the most excited about that. And I would love to, I've been waiting for the Cybertruck. I've had my order in for like a long time, haven't got an email yet from Elon. So waiting for that email to come through so I can configure my Cybertruck, get my FSD on it. And yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm looking for. However, I'm excited to see. I think Roadster is still a long ways away, but I think so. I'm not focused on that because I don't think it's going to
Why
happen
is
in the
that a
next couple of
long
years.
why is that a long ways away? They have a prototype, they have videos of people driving it. Like what's the holdup?
I think right now the focus that Elon clearly has is the whole company is to pivot it into an AI company. And I think that's his biggest focus right now. I think the robotaxis and FSD is where 100% of its attention is going. And we've also seen Tesla timelines are not the world's best. They eventually always succeed, but their timelines are always like a few years early. So I think Roadster is still a ways ahead, but I'm excited about that. I'm also excited to see if they refresh the Model S's and X's, which I think it's about time for a refresh. I would love to do that because I was gonna buy one, but then I don't want to buy one now, and then there's like a refresh next year. So
Especially
I'm
when they
waiting
have
for that.
competitors, right? Porsche Taycan, Audi
Yeah,
e-tron. It's eating up some of their market share if they don't do refreshes soon. So, um,
100%.
what
Yeah.
about the robotics side? I know they're Tesla Optimus, I think it's called. They
Hmm.
have these robots now, humanoid robots. I don't. What is Elon's vision with that?
I think it's very early to say, and I personally like the if you look at the numbers, if you look at the statistics and the research, then they do say that eventually by 2030, everybody's going to have a robot and people are going to pay thousands of dollars a month when the robot is able to do basic tasks that people need to get done. I am not seeing that Optimus side of business just yet. I mean, it's a potential value add, but if I was to add, let's say, a value to that, maybe $5 a share is what it's worth at this moment on the Tesla stock price. It's too early to say, or where that's headed on how it's going to be used. Is it going to be more for commercial users? Is it going to be more for retail users? I think it's a hard one to say right now. It's very early.
Okay, let's move on to a few other assets that you're following. So TAN, TAN is the ticker, Solar Clean Energy ETF. You think it's due for a comeback as a trade? Yeah. What's been going on there? It's been beaten down significantly over the last couple of months. What's the story there?
Yeah, so I think just like, stories more from the technical perspective, right? Whenever I see these kind of opportunities where stock is reversing back to the mean, and you can see 10, ICLN, all these ETFs had a huge run up, right? Prior to this 2020, 2021, and everything started to pull back. The whole solar sector, like SEDG, First Solar, Enphase Energy, a lot of these stocks have pulled back, but I think technically they're at a point where they're currently sitting at support. Again, if you I sent you the chart, you can see it's coming right into a massive long-term uptrend line. It's coming into a prior area where it broke out from. And I think that is a very tradable spot for at least a trade, not a long-term investment forever, but I think for a trade for the next year or so, I think those ETFs is what I personally, full disclosure, position myself in for a comeback for next year.
Is that tell us what's in these ETFs, major holdings of these ETFs, this one in particular.
Yeah, it's mostly solar companies like, SEDG, Solar Edge, Enphase Energy. A lot of these different clean and alternative energy stocks are included in that. So I think as we, go further into the, I guess, clean energy future, even with Tesla, for example, I think a lot of these stocks are going to start to see more of the market share come in. And oil's not really coming down, right? I mean, the traditional energy sources aren't really coming down. So I think there's going to be more move towards that. And yeah, but for me personally, technical perspective is really what matters. Because one thing I've noticed recently, at least for the last couple of years, is everybody has an opinion online on what something is going, why it's going up, why it's going down. What's often served me in my career is by removing all the emotion, removing all the subjective opinions. Because everything is fundamental analysis, pretty much is opinions, right? Your opinion versus mine, somebody else's opinion versus somebody else. And that's kind of subjective. The only objective truth is the price. Price never lies. It is what it is. And I think that is one thing I'm focused on in this market is not trying to read into why or what my bigger picture idea is, but more so taking trades technically based on trend lines, based on support. And I think that's where the edge lies because you know when to buy and you know also when to get out, which is a lot of fundamental analysis doesn't allow us. It doesn't never tells us when to get out of the trade, right? You could be holding on forever and you're like, why is Zoom down? Everybody's using Zoom. Well,
Yeah,
technically it got extended.
when do you get out of a trade? Just any trade. What do you look for?
So I'm looking for breaks of the reason why I got in. So if let's say something is an uptrend line, right? It comes down to an uptrend line and I bought that stock. Now, as long as it stays above that uptrend line, I could stay in the trade. When I see that pattern break and now the uptrend has broken, and instead of it making higher highs and higher lows, now it starts to make a lower high and lower low, and it's clearly trending down, and you can draw a line on your chart. Then those are the signals that I use to get out. So I always ask myself, the reason why I got into the trade, is that reason still valid? If yes, I'll stay in the trade. If the reason I got into it is no longer valid, I got into it because it bounced from an uptrend line. But if it broke the uptrend line, why am I still in it? Right. So it's like classical joke where the fundamental analysis and the technical analysis go on dinner. They're cutting the steak, the knife goes flying, and they're watching the knife come down, stabs them in the foot. The technical guy's like, why didn't you move your feet? The fundamental guy's like, oh, I thought it'll go back up. Like, I don't want to trade on hope. I want to trade on what's happening, learning how to take quick losses, learning how to take quick wins. I think that's where a lot of the, I guess, potential for me lies in the markets.
I haven't heard that joke before. Okay, that's a good one. Uh,
Yeah.
um, but okay, you look at a chart like TAN, for example, and you see it going down just over the course
Mm.
of a year and a half. I mean, you look at that chart and what's your first thought? Do you think to yourself, gee, it's time to get in, where this is a terrible asset and it's time to just stay
Mm.
away?
Yeah, let me see if I bring my screen up here. I'll show you the chart that I'm looking at so it makes more sense here. Perfect. So if you take a look on this ETF here, when I connected these points here, we got a long-term trend line, right? Coming into a long-term trend line on TAN. And then you can see here, this was the prior resistance area on TAN. So it broke out above there, pulled back right into that area. And in technical analysis, we say is when support resistance is broken on the way down, it becomes support. So that's why I'm looking at this zone as a potential support, and I got an uptrend line. So for me, I think about it like, okay, if I buy it at the uptrend line, let's say it holds and it goes back up, my reward is potentially pretty big, but my risk is pretty small. If the uptrend line breaks here, I'm not going to stay in the trade. I'll get out of the trade, right? So I think that gives me an opportunity where my risk is so small, but the opportunity for this ETF to make a comeback, right, is pretty big. So I think that is what I'm looking at is potential reward, and then potential risk is like maybe this amount. So that's one thing to look at on TAN.
Hmm.
And another ETF is ICLN. You can see the same thing in there too. And I think there's a lot of people in Congress actually buying call options on these ETFs too. So that, again, you could bring whatever that's worth, for whatever that's worth. That is another thing you can add on to your bias is that
What
a lot of
what are they buying?
they were buying call options on ICLN, which is the same clean energy ETF. Some
Uh,
congressmen, some Republicans. So I'm like, all right, that aligns with my trend line bias. I'll use that as a traded opportunity and see what I can get on these things.
Final topic I want to cover is MJ. It's the marijuana ETF. Uh, is this a fundamental play or a technical play for you?
This is purely a trade. Like fundamentally, I think marijuana sector, although used to be a really cash flow positive sector where, a lot of companies were holding a lot of cash, recently that's not the case. I had a lot of angel investments in startup marijuana companies, and a lot of them are struggling right now, right? I get the updates from them. They're not public companies, but they're struggling. There's a lot of supply. There's still black market that they're competing with. So, and it's just like everybody's a grower now, right? And there's like New York City, take a look. There's a lot of shops. None of them are really approved. So there's a lot of competition because the illegal aspect is not being really taken care of. But from a tradable perspective, what I'm looking at is, hey, perhaps as we get closer to the election, perhaps there's going to be some sort of talks of legalization. We actually saw, I think it was Biden and Kamala Harris and all these other people tweeting on 420 on April 20th about marijuana and how we need to, all these people who are in jail for these offenses need to be taken care of. So they're starting to soften their voices there, and election year is coming up. So I'm looking at it as a trade where A, something is really oversold. The sector has been beaten down and crushed. And technically we're seeing a big volume spikes happen on, this ETF at the lows. Typically, when you see something selling off and you see volume spikes picking up at the lows, that's a sign of accumulation. And chart perspective, we can see how the chart was going down and now it's just going sideways, dead flat. So that is typically before it starts an uptrend, you start seeing that. So I'm using it as a pure trade, looking for a bounce on it, not looking to hold it long term. I think the sector is a tough one to make money in. However, as a trade, I think there's a pretty big upside to be had on ETFs like MSOS, ETFs like MJ, and personally, I'm looking at as a potential trade.
That is exactly what happened, by the way, in Canada. The Horizons marijuana ETF. A
Mhm.
lot of Canadian companies in that ETF. I believe weed was legalized in Canada in 2018, and the ETF was rising all throughout 2017 in anticipation of that. And then when the actual news came out, it shot through the roof. Interestingly,
Mhm.
though, it didn't stay up for very long. Now it's like, I think, a seventh of its high. So that sector
Right.
hasn't done well since legalization. But yes, the news could move these stocks if it gets approved. Definitely. So
Absolutely.
so final thoughts then, Emma. What are you most bullish on this year, given everything we've talked about so far?
I'm most bullish. I think it goes without saying. We spend most of the show talking about Tesla, so I would
Okay.
say Tesla is the one that I'm most bullish on as far as a play where I don't even mind holding it, for a while, even if I have to stay in it. Whereas these others that I mentioned, like TAN, MJ, they're more of trades where I'm looking for a bounce, and you can bet I'm going to be out of them when I get a decent enough bounce. So they're not something I'm going to hold on forever. I think Tesla is what I'm most bullish on, and I'm also most pretty bullish on altcoins if interest rates start coming down. I think altcoins that have, for the most part, lagged, right? Cardano and Algorand, they've lagged behind Bitcoin. They haven't really participated with the Bitcoin rally. So I'm excited about those. I think Tesla and altcoins like Algorand.
Perfect. Where can we follow your work, Ammo?
Best place would be Twitter or Instagram. My username on both of those is the same, Delta90, DELTA99ETY. And to learn more about my trading, you could go to livetraders.com or my website, unmol.net.
Perfect. We'll put the links down in the description below, so make sure to check out Ammo there. Thanks very much, Ammo. We'll speak again soon.
Always good chatting with you.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.